Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Education and Employment Committee meeting at the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council. The time is now 3:09. Today is Wednesday, July 19, 2023. At this time, I'm going to ask for a roll call and a brief introduction. When your name is called, please state your name and just give a brief introduction.
Ms. Banks.
Hello, I'm Nicole Banks. I am the chair of the district.
Ms. Bayham.
Hi, I'm Melissa Bayham. I'm the Director of Louisiana Rehabilitation Services.
Ms. Kosa. Ms. Gonzalez. Ms. Jordan.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. Meredith Jordan, Executive Director for Diverse Learners at the Department of Education.
Dr. McGee.
Greetings, everyone. Education and Employment Chairperson, Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council.
Ms. Pulitzer. I'm sorry. You have your
Bambi Palazola, I'm the Director for the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs.
Ms. Tarver.
I'm Mary Tarver. I'm a parent from Alexandria.
Ms. Webb. Dr. Wilson. Mr. Taylor.
You want to give a brief introduction, Mr. Taylor?
Okay. And Ms. Washington.
Present, my name is Renata Washington. I am a parent from Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a member of the Louisiana Developmental Disabilities Council.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Was that everyone?
And you have one.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And so now we will review the meeting protocol that you can see they are posted up here. We just want to make note that members should be recognized by the chair before speaking. We will refrain from using acronyms and alphabets that we cannot provide the definitions to. If we need to take a break, we will, but I don't think that that would need to be happening because we're so late in the afternoon. And so they're all presented. With that being said, the next item on the agenda is an approval for the January meeting minutes. The meeting summary was provided to all members via email. If there are any questions or corrections, please note at this time. It's been moved by Mary, seconded by Nicole. Any public comments regarding this motion about the minutes? Any objections or abstentions to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, carried. The minutes, the January minutes are now approved. We'll now move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the contractual updates. We will start with the Louisiana Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Alliance from Stephanie Pomona.
So this is activity 3.1.1. Dr. Beckers is serving as the LAPI liaison with the Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Programs within the Board of Regents. They are currently focusing on disseminating application reminders for the fund. $1 million was appropriated to the Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Fund to fund programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities at Louisiana post-secondary institutions. This fund was created during the last legislative session with an initial appropriation of $1 million. While the $1 million appropriated this year is short of the council and the CAN's $3 million ask, we are thankful for the legislator for their continued support of these programs. The LAPI website is also updated was updated to make it more easily accessible and to highlight more social media posts. All their posts are used to promote awareness of LaPi and the available resources. And within this quarter, those interactions on social media have increased.
Any questions for Stephanie regarding the report from LaPi?
Hey, I don't have any questions, but I wanted to say that the program, Sparrow is what they call it at LSUA in Alexandria, and they this week just celebrated their first anniversary with their 4 students, and then they're accepting 4 more. So they're going to have 8 students on campus next or this August in this next semester. So it's exciting to see.
Just to add to that, if I can, it is really exciting to hear about additional opportunities for these students coming up across our state. One of the things, as we've talked about LaPi and as I hear updates about it, I want to do a better job at the department of linking to the opportunities, especially as new opportunities at different post-secondary institutions come up, so that even in our school systems, they're aware of these post-secondary opportunities for some of our students with more significant disabilities, and we can increase the numbers of these students who are enrolling in post-secondary, where if I don't know those opportunities are out there, then I'm not going to be able to communicate that option to families and even as school counselors, knowing where these schools are. So I want to go back with our communications team as well and see if I can link to either the LaPi website, because it lists all of these locations, right? Okay.
And I would just like to give my go to conference plug for this meeting. It's next week, and on Tuesday at noon, there will be a panel of student and alumni from these programs that Dr. Beckers will be leading that discussion. So I think that'll be really interesting, and that's the session on Tuesday at noon.
I couldn't make a really fun drinking Go Doug Cup.
Expect you all to register and attend.
All right, any other questions or comments regarding LaPi? Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie, for the report. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, is the contractual update from seminars on hiring individuals with development of stability. Hannah will be given that report, I believe.
I'm actually going to give that. I'm sorry about that. I did not change that. Hannah is not here today. So this is activity 3.2.1. So 23 East, which was formerly O'Neill Communications, has developed a plan to start promoting and organizing this webinar series. They have been in discussion with our staff and have approached a partnership with LRS. They are approaching this series as a step-by-step of what employers need to know and do to make disability a part of their DEI hiring process. They have developed a branding and outreach plan for the webinar series, and it's called Your Next Best Hire. It is a 5-part series for employers so that they can see what they need to know on how to include people with disabilities in their hiring process. The webinar series is planned to run from June 21st to August 23rd, online via Zoom. The first webinar, What is Inclusion in the Workplace, was held on June 21st. A recording of this webinar will be available soon. The second webinar was called Getting Started. That was held on July 12th. And it covered a few new developments around hiring and discussing how employers can tap into the services behind LRS to add to their hiring practices. And there are 3 final webinars that are scheduled, and the dates for those are July 25th, August 9th, and August 23rd. The information and registration links were shared on, through our LADDC news. They are on our website and on our social media pages.
Okay, any questions for Stephanie regarding that report?
Stephanie, do you know if they've reached out to, the Workforce Commission, Louisiana Workforce Commission, to promote it?
I am not sure, but I can find out.
Because they have to register employers. So if they did like an advertisement on their website, it might grab employers.
Any other questions for Stephanie regarding the activity 3.2.1 or any comments?
I have a question, but I think Bambi can answer. If not, I'm appointing Bambi to answer. For the pie. Never mind, it's in my standard report. We're good. Are you busy next week?
I don't have anything on my schedule.
Okay, so there's no other comments. We are going to move right on to the next item on the agenda, which is from Melissa Bayham, Louisiana Rehabilitation Services Report.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was requested to provide an update on the LRS LDOE Memorandum of Understanding, and I am happy to report that this has been approved by both Dr. Brumley and Ava Cates, the Secretary of the Workforce Commission. So what I did is I provided you with the language of the MOU. That's the handout that I gave you. And so that shows what LWC LRS agrees to, as well as the Louisiana Department of Education. So it's a lot, so I don't expect you to read this all right now, but certainly after you do read it, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. But this is just an agreement of how LRS and the Department of Education will collaborate to provide more effective transition services to students with disabilities, including but not limited to our provision of pre-employment transition services that are provided within our school districts. And I'm sure Meredith is going to provide some additional information, but the Department of Education has applied for what's called a Disability Innovation Fund grant, which is actually through the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which is where we are actually funded. So these are actually funds that VR agencies, vocational rehabilitation agencies, were not able to spend. So it's put into this Disability Innovation Fund grant. And because a lot of the vocational rehabilitation agencies are already involved in Disability Innovation Fund grants, like we are with Southern University, they also allowed the state educational agencies to apply for these grants this go round. They've had several go rounds of these grants. And so I'm very pleased that our Louisiana Department of Education did apply for a Disability Innovation Fund grant to, and I'm sure Meredith will give you better information on that since she applied, her department applied, but is essentially to improve our transition services and to do some model demonstrations that we can replicate in other regions. And so vocational rehabilitation is obviously a required partner, and we are happy to partner if the grant is awarded with the Department of Education. We continue to get a lot more school districts on board, but we are not at 100% as far as having either a vendor of ours who provides these services in the school districts, or the school district can also enter into what's called a third-party cooperative arrangement, where they provide state or local funds to draw down the federal funds for a transition specialist in their district. We do continue to have districts that are entering into these agreements. We find that these agreements, in my opinion, are a best case scenario because the districts have an actual person that they employ with these vocational rehabilitation funds to provide these transition services. Some districts are just very nervous about having outside vendors come on to their schools. And so we are continuing to promote those third-party cooperative arrangements, and they also help us to draw down additional federal funds that are allocated to Louisiana for our individuals with disabilities. The only other update I would like to make is we have, and I'm not sure, I wasn't here at the last council meeting, but we have completely rolled out our new support employment milestone system. As of the legislative session before last now, there were some resolutions passed for us to do a rate study. And as a result of that rate study, we increased our rates for supported employment. So they have been increased by $3,500 per participant in order for obviously our vendors to have the resources that they need to be able to provide these services to our individuals with disabilities. One thing that other than the rates increasing, we did add some additional milestones so that vendors are compensated more throughout the process. And milestone one is now job search assistance. So this allows the vendor to be paid once they provide job search assistance for the first week. We can make that payment so that the vendors have that funding available for that job developer. Whereas before in the milestone system, the vendor did not get paid until they actually placed the individual into employment. And so our next step is to increase our rates for our other employment services, which we are actively working on. We will be increasing our rates for job readiness and placement services, customized employment, and time-limited job coaching. And so you'll see a similar change or shift in those rates where we will include that service of job search assistance to provide that additional funding support for our providers so that they can provide services. LRS continues to have vacancies, and I know our vendors do as well. And so I'm hoping that this financial support will help them to be able to recruit and retain employees for themselves as well. We continue to, we're up to 63 rehabilitation counselors statewide, but I still have 23 vacancies. So we still continuously actively recruit for rehabilitation counselors statewide. We have a continuous posting on the civil service website. So if you know individuals who would like to join our team, please send them to the civil service website to apply to that continuous posting. We pull it every 2 weeks, so we will definitely see them. But those are my two major updates if anyone has any questions. Yes, ma'am.
So were y'all able to fill that position up in the Houma Terrebonne area?
Are you talking about the rehabilitation employment development specialist? It's still vacant. So that is the only, we call that our REDS, which is it's basically our in-house job developer that we have in each region. We were never able to find a qualified applicant. It's about time for us to repost it. You can't keep it posted, but we probably need to repost it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Jill.
Sorry, I think I heard you wrong. Thing is, you have 23 reds.
I have 23 vacant counselor positions. I have
Okay.
8 REDS positions, which is the Rehabilitation Employment Development Specialist, try not to use acronyms. And I have 1 vacancy for that position, and that's in the Houma area.
Thank you.
I think we had talked about before on the districts that don't participate or don't have somebody in the school system. How, because we find that a lot, and I don't know if Rapides Parish, do you know off the top of your head? I think that it was before, I think when you reported, we haven't been
Okay.
on
Yeah, I don't know.
top of that, but so I just wondered how.
I can definitely, right, and I can definitely give updates on specific districts. I can tell you that, and Rapides comes to my mind. At one point, we were providing a lot of our pre-employment transition services to the JAG program, and Rapides had a lot of JAG programs, and we know, and JAG is separate. I mean, it's always been separate, but we're no longer providing pre-employment transition services through JAG. So it's been a little bit slower getting those districts back on board because we were basically doing it through JAG.
What's JAG?
JAG is Jobs for America's Graduates. It's a program for at-risk youth, I believe. It's actually in the Office of Workforce Development. Now it was under the Department of Education, and now it's actually at the Workforce Commission.
And why aren't y'all using pre-eds for that anymore?
That is not my decision. So JAG still exists, and the JAG services are still what they always have been, but they have chosen to fund it differently. They received a significant amount of state general funds, so they were able to fund their program without the use of pre-employment transition services. So they decided to do it that way. There's a little bit more administrative functions with our funding because we have progress reports and they have to invoice per student, per district. So since they were able to secure the state general funds that they needed, and they also receive a lot of TANF funding for that, because they didn't need our funding, that's why that stopped. But it could, if they lost funding or if their funding was reduced, I could see them coming back.
So I can't rationalize why we would not use federal funding and use state funding.
That was not my decision.
Okay. I'm not saying it was, but
Would they be focusing on students with disabilities? Or their
So this gets a little complicated, but it was very complex because the JAG program does not only serve individuals with disabilities. And so you have to ensure that the federal funds do not contribute to the students without disabilities, which was very, it was very complex at the funding level. It was actually, we had an audit finding on JAG, so.
But I wonder, does that necessarily mean that those JAG students aren't receiving pre-eds like through?
They may be receiving more service, potentially, because they may be receiving services through JAG and they may be receiving services through a vendor, if we have a vendor at that particular school district.
so how can we get, and I should know this, can we get a list of what school districts have that cooperative agreement?
Oh.
And is that and also, is that like on your website or is that something that you have to get from you?
The copy of that list we wouldn't have on our website, but it's easy for me to get for you.
And Mary, to your point too, I was going to say, we're bringing all SPED directors together for a fall collaborative. And I think it would be beneficial to talk about this opportunity for all of them. Now they're going to go back and partner with, maybe a career in tech ed or a transition person, but at least I can help communicate that out to our SPED directors. And in the grant that Melissa talked about that we're applying for, that is exactly the model that we are promoting, is that cooperative third-party agreement. And our plan is to, through this grant and through the school systems we plan to work with, come up with a framework that's scalable, that any school system can pick up and say, here's how I should provide transition services for students, including those pre-ed services. And by and large, what we find, just like Melissa said, if I have a person at the school district through this third-party cooperative agreement who is championing that transition work, those are the school systems where we see those inclusive CTE experiences and those inclusive transition practices and really great transition services where like I have a plan the day after I graduate. And so we can definitely.
And I can tell you off the top of my head, Livingston Parish and Bossier Parish, they added people to their third-party cooperative arrangements because they're really high proponents of it. The thing that kind of scares school districts sometimes is you can't use your IDEA funds to match. It has to be state or local funds.
Mm-hmm. And also in regards to information, the vendors, how is that on your website? The list of the vendors?
The list of vendors.
So how do people know who's available?
So when, The counselors are supposed to provide that information to the students and
But not just for students, I'm talking about for adults.
correct. We
Okay.
have not put our vendors on our website because it's a fluid list. We renew people, we add people all the time, and to update the LWC website it would be a task in itself to request to add some, it would be like every week we would be asking to change something on the website.
Do you have that vendors come and go that quick, like every week?
Not every week, but we do update vendors on a periodic basis. And it's just something that we don't want to be inaccurate on the website.
Mhm.
So we've never put it up there.
Mhm.
But
I
we
just feel
can,
like this information people should have, even if it has like effective, August 1st. And so people know if they go August 30th, something could have changed in that time frame. Like, because I have no idea who the vendors are for employment, and I think that makes it complicated, for people to really understand, because it's already complex to understand the system.
right.
So,
Understand. I wish we had a system. I know when I worked for the Department of Health, it was very easy to update things, and we don't have that system.
Mhm.
Something to look into.
I had a question too. This is on more the employment side. But like when I was studying, rehab in school in the state and how federal works. Isn't the LRI supposed to be present at the job centers? Cause I've worked there for 8 years and I've never seen CRC come through our door.
Okay, yeah, we are required to have a presence in the comprehensive one-stop. So there would be 15 of those across the state, not the affiliates. But sometimes it's not a 40-hour-a-week presence. It could be a counselor who comes, depending on the one-stop's needs, or if they have, sometimes the issue is space. We don't have an office for our counselor in all the one-stops. But there's definitely supposed to be accessibility. In other words, the one-stop should be able to easily connect an individual who is seeking vocational rehabilitation to our local office. There should be a process in place for that.
Any other questions for Melissa regarding her report? Melissa, at this time, are you entertaining questions regarding the memorandum of understanding, or are we?
That is up to you. I just didn't know, you kind of sat there and read it.
I believe we. I don't know if we just did music, I didn't even email, so, first of all, thank you for getting this done. We have been working hard for at least, I don't know, Mary, how long you and I have been here? Ever to get a memorandum of understanding between DOE and LRS. So thank you so much for getting us to this point. It took us some time, but it's gratitude that we see this in front of us. But I do have a few questions. I'm noticing the language in the agreement for LRS specific in saying what their accountability will be, what their responsibility would be, but more particularly being specific in what they are committing to provide to this MOU. The language that's used for LRS, terminology as ensure, laws are cited, collaboration is mentioned, development, all of those type of words that provide a climate of accountability. My concern is that when I read the Department of Education's agreement, I see language advise and encourage, advise and encourage, 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 encourage. And I think I'm hopeful that the needs of the public will require more than just encouragement when it comes to ensuring that our students with disabilities are getting that access to the secondary lifestyle that they deserve. My question is this:
who will be ensuring that this MOU and the deliverables that's on the MOU will be enacted, followed through? Who will be monitoring this? How often will this MOU be monitored to ensure that these commitments will be held? And what will happen if LEAs decide not to take the encouragement from the Department of Ed when it comes to ensuring that the needs of the students are being met? So thank you so much.
So I can, so in terms of, just to explain, my position as the LRS director, we are the state vocational rehabilitation agency, and we expend all funds, and I'm responsible for all VR services throughout the state of Louisiana. But I think, and I'll let Meredith speak to this, the way LDE is structured with the school districts is different the way LRS is structured with the regional offices. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, Meredith, or.
Yeah, I think, as we were taking a look at this, and we had an MOU years past, remember, I think when I came into this role, there wasn't an MOU signed. And so we started working as quickly as we could. We knew this was an important task for this council as well, to get one signed and agreed upon. And we definitely recognize the struggle of, we can't force our LEAs to enter into these partnerships or how they provide transition services or who they use to deliver those. But I think what we are certainly committed to is putting together, like I said, I think getting this grant and getting a framework for these services and saying, this is the partnership that we believe would make successful transition services. We're certainly committed to doing all those things. There is a challenge there in saying, LEA, you must get a third-party cooperative agreement. We're just not allowed to have that kind of control and requirement to say you must have this partnership, if that makes sense.
So I'm looking at number 7, where it says advise and encourage LEAs to provide LRS a signed IEP, a signed 504 accommodation plan, or other medical documentation of a disability signed by the appropriate medical professional. So that's something that in your role, you could not ensure more than encourage that would happen for that student.
One of the things that we think is going to help this too, and we've talked about, and it's actually written into our grant, is to create a shared website. I think if parents knew the documentation and the forms that were required, so that's referring to those forms that are required for parents to sign and actually release that information. And I think what we can do is to help communicate and make sure all of that information is accessible to families and know what's out there and what steps they have to take to be successful in getting these set up for their children.
And then the last question was, who will be providing the oversight to ensure that this agreement, this MOU is being actualized? And when will this MOU start? What's the start date?
It's already started.
Yeah.
But as far as who will, so I have a pre-employment transition services team of 3 individuals in my section. And so they would be the ones responsible for this, but then obviously if there are issues at the district level, they would bring it to my attention.
And so from LDOE, who's going to be providing the oversight on your end? That sounds like LRS has their, who will be managing this MOU?
This will live with me on my team.
So you personally will be
Yes.
managing the MOU? So if there's any questions or comments regarding anything with this, parents should be directed to contact you directly. Any other questions? Bill?
Oh, sorry.
That's all you're on.
Do you have a date that this took effect.
I believe my secretary signed it on in April, but I don't remember the date on the actual MOU. If you give me just a minute, I can find it.
So this is the question, and so Jill, so what
You don't know how I love
Right.
it.
Right. And so what's in front of us is nothing that's signed, nothing that has a date, nothing that says when this contract takes effect. Nothing that says this is gonna be annually, it's gonna be reviewed there. And I think to Jill's point, and Jill, I'm not speaking for you, we don't see that here. So when is this?
Right, and so I saw this on the agenda and I didn't have time to vet through my department and through the Department of Education if they wanted the actual document. But I can
It's
certainly
a
do that.
3-year MOU.
I'm sorry?
It's a 3-year MOU, so it will go through June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. But we're certainly willing to work together, review, revise before 3 years if we feel like there's something that needs to be added.
One more question, where is that written, where it, is there you're saying that there's another document other than this that has all of that for the public to be aware of?
The only thing that you don't have in front of you is the signature page, and I think there's a first page, but this was the meat and potatoes.
The deliverables.
It was the deliverables.
Go ahead, Jill, thank you, sorry.
I think you're looking more for the official contract to see when the date, when the i's are dotted and the t's were crossed. And this is the bulk of the gist of the MOU.
So I was hoping that
But
we would get everything, date when it started, date when it ends, how long it is, the whole thing, and then making that notice, for the public.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure that you had something in front of you for this meeting.
it's a work in progress.
In this particular, this MOU is required for the Workforce and Innovation Opportunity Act. And so it will be something that continues to be updated.
So perhaps maybe the next meeting, you can have the full executed contract for the Education and Employment Committee to have and to also present to the full council.
Did you?
I did think that one of the reasons why we were asking for this, was so that we could see what the progress was. So I think that's an important piece too, is, if it's that you've got to, you have some things in here saying, they're gonna decide, or, when a student is determined to be eligible, then you're gonna have things that are gonna happen. And so I think, is there a way that some of these things, some of these things to be monitored and reported back to the committee?
I can.
Like with the student, like for number 4, just for instance, that they're gonna have those, if they qualify, then they're gonna have an individualized employment plan. And by the time that they leave school, so is that something that's like a check mark, like student A has this? Yes, is that something? Will it work itself to that detail?
I'm trying to figure out as you're speaking how I could report that to you. Because we serve thousands of students every year. I would think about how I can report that.
And I'm just pointing that, just like, as you're looking at this, now we know what the deliverables are. And when it comes to developmental disabilities and students at this, we're trying to monitor who's being served and where the disparities, lay, then it's going to help us to be able to see that and, try and work better with Department of Education on, who else do we need to meet with? What do we need to do to get the schools on board? Because students are not going to be served in every area of the state.
Correct. And that goes against Dr. McKee's point, like what does, that goes back to the contract and what does it specifically say in what areas of the state get served?
And I will definitely vet that and make sure that I can get that to you next time. But what I did provide you, this is directly from the MOU. These are the deliverables of the MOU.
Nicole, will you be recognized?
Okay, so I know we're trying to get something tangible done as far as like, what we see on paper, the measurables. So I've worked in the school system for a long time, and some of the teachers have already developed what you guys are asking for. They've developed a checklist. So what they do is they put everything on that checklist. Did the student get an IEP? Was it delivered to their parents? Did they talk to them? It's a whole checklist done. And the student name is just on there. All the student names that's involved in that particular program is on there, and whoever's the administrator, they check off and they go and make sure that was done, But everything's already on a sheet of paper. So I don't want y'all to invent the wheel if it's already done, because that kind of stuff is like in place. Maybe you guys can reach out to a school district or something like that to see how they have it in place, because this kind of stuff is an easy fix. Very easy to get us something that's measurable. It shouldn't take the rest of the year to get this done. Nor should it take the rest of the year for us to get what we need to get done, what we've been asking for. We got it almost. We almost got it, but yeah. But we've been asking for this, like Dr. McKee said.
I guess maybe about 5 years.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
too long.
good to see that there's,
Yeah.
that something is happening now. And I think that that's important to recognize that, the two entities have got together, they have discussed, they have developed, and they are making steps, right? And that's the concern. I think the position of the families and public that we serve always ends up on the end of accountability, Melissa, right? Words are just words on the paper. Our families are asking for action, and they're crying out for supports for their children and their families. And so it's great to see this, but it speaks to the volume of work that we need to continue to do, because advising and courage is still very subjective, and it does not give much weight to hold districts accountable for not following through what's on this MOU. And so great on paper, great for effort, but when it gets actually down to the people, are they actually getting what they are deserving to get? And that's the concern. That's the biggest concern. And so I'm seeing what LRS is committing to do, and I applaud the efforts of the two agencies getting together. Any other questions regarding this MOU or questions for Melissa?
I have one.
Yes.
I heard you say that, you guys service a lot of students and things like that, and I'm kind of just trying to get information. You service all, like, how would we know, who are you servicing? Because,
Are you talking about students?
yes,
So first, I'm going to tell you, so vocational rehabilitation is required to make pre-employment transition services available to all students with disabilities. And so we are, we have 8 regional offices, and our staff in the regional offices connect with the school districts to provide services to those students. And so I think what we're talking about here is it works really well in certain districts and not so well in other districts. So it's, we're trying to make this process better, make the collaboration better, because essentially at the end of the day, we are required to make sure that every student with a disability has access to these services.
okay. So does it include charter school, all of that? Like,
Yes, it does. Yes,
It does?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I teach at a charter school and we don't know anything about LRS.
Okay. Actually, a lot of charter schools.
I'm only aware, but,
Yeah,
you know, but.
for whatever reason, we have a lot of charter schools in the New Orleans area that have third-party cooperative.
Okay, so how can we ensure that all school districts are receiving information about LRS?
Need to make sure your school district's on our list, which I think we got the list from the Department of Education, so we can make sure that happens.
Okay. Could we receive a list of all districts just so that we could, you know, because accountability is important. I think that somewhere along the line, there's, you know, it's just a lot of things probably involved where the ball is dropped or.
And we keep a list of districts and where we are with each district. It's changed, it's a fluid list, but we definitely have.
Nicole, you're being recognized.
Okay, shouldn't all the districts in Louisiana be covered automatically?
They're automatically covered, but I think the elephant in the room, I know for LRS is concerned, even though I kind of discussed this earlier. How many school districts are in Louisiana? I don't know.
Along with charters, approximately between 170 and 180,
Okay,
along with charters.
and I have 63 rehabilitation counselors who also serve the adult population. So, and actually I was just looking at an audit report today. Back in 1999, LRS had over 150 rehabilitation counselors. And so to say we're managing with a skeleton crew, we're doing the best that we can, because I'm going to tell you, I mean, this is on LRS just as much as the Department of Education. We do not have the resources or the personnel right now to do what I would call a robust effort to get in some of these districts. So I try as much as I can at my level to educate. You know, I attended and presented at the Jumpstart Conference. Anytime that I can get in front of educators, I try to get the word out so that, because I also have staff in my office. So if we have in school districts who want third-party cooperative arrangements, that's handled by somebody in my office. So that kind of takes the pressure off of my field staff and puts it on that particular individual, and he arranges everything with the third parties. So we're definitely trying, but it could be better if I had a full staff. Does that make sense?
So the staff is kind of the reason why everybody is not getting served?
To a certain extent. I mean, there's several things, and there's certain districts, I don't know off the top of my head, and it's not a large number, but haven't want to play it with us for some reason. They just, so it's just, there's different things in different areas, depending on the particular area of the state. But I can tell you that we could definitely be doing a better job. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But we're trying the best that we can. And my administrative office is trying to reach out to districts as well.
Okay, yeah, because I just think that everybody in Louisiana should be offered
Right.
this,
And
regardless.
I want to make this point as well. I think part of the struggle is that, this requirement, and when I say requirement, I hate to say that because this is something that we should, this is obviously something that we should be doing. Transition is very important to our students with disabilities. But the requirement for pre-employment transition services is through the Rehabilitation Act and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And it's very interesting to me, we are under the Federal Department of Education. However, these requirements are not in the requirements under IDEA, for example. So we're having to tell districts it's the law, but it's not their law. Like we follow the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, they follow IDEA. It would be nice if the federal government would put it in both of them. That would make it, I know that's easier said than done.
Right.
But it's a little bit difficult if I just come to you and I say, Nicole, it's the law, you need to do this, but you read your law, and you're like, what's not my law? So I think that's one of it's not it's a compliance issue for us, but it's not a compliance issue for the districts. So that's, I think sometimes.
So we're not on the same page.
In certain areas, but I think when districts see what these services can do for their students, DeSoto Parish, for whatever reason comes to my mind, they do an
They're great.
amazing job with their transition. And I know they, I think it was Jumpstart Conference, but not this year, but the year before they presented. And so I think when we get those districts in front of other districts and they can see what's possible and the outcomes that these students are having, I think it's definitely a great thing.
I also want to also encourage this MOU to go out to our families, health and family centers as well, so they are informed, as well as the CAN leaders. Everyone needs to be informed of this MOU and, but I mean, the actual contract, when it started, when it ended, and the responsibilities. I think Lauren had her hand raised. Lauren?
Two things real quick. I know, more time. I think it's also important when you're voting for your school board to make them aware of it from their end and hold them accountable as well. And I really think Melissa or Bambi could explain it a lot more eloquently than I could about the federal match that everybody with a disability needs to be advocating for. Because when you hear it, you're just going to be blown away. Can you kind of sum it up quickly?
Sure. So we have a 78.7% federal match, but it requires a 21.3% state match. So just to give you some rough numbers, I can tell you we return about 50% of our vocational rehabilitation grant back to the federal government because we do not have the state general funds to match the grant. So we receive approximately, it depends on the year, between 28 and $31 million is what we end up keeping in Louisiana, but our actual allocation, it continues to increase. I believe it may be up to around $65 million. So also, if we had the resources available, that would obviously be very helpful.
I mean, how many of us have a family member of a child with a disability or a family member? And it's going to affect the population getting older. It affects everybody. And I think for too long, we've ignored it. And that's something that I feel why I joined the council too. It's because I think if more people knew and we hold our lawmakers accountable, that they need to, it's a good investment.
Definitely agree. And also those third parties, when the districts provide those matching funds, those are new federal dollars we're able to pull down. So it actually, we get about a little under $8 million of state general funds. But if you do the math, it's not going to come out because we're able to draw those other additional funds other than the funds that we draw down with the state general funds with the matching funds from the school district.
And I would just like to say this all comes back to what our expectations are for people with disabilities. I think I feel like we have done so much. I know while I've been in my role in this administration, we've done so much for people with disabilities, but the one area that we have failed is what Melissa just described. Because we could be getting this such a tremendous amount of federal funds, be able to staff her office, to be able to do this outreach, to be able to have more robust services. And we haven't done that. And so I think it comes down to our advocacy. So I think as a council, as you move forward, is to really think about, like what Lauren was just saying, is that we need to start prioritizing employment. We need to understand it, what they're talking about, what employment's talking about, what transition, and really advocate for that in the way we've advocated for home and community-based services. And we moved it forward for home and community-based services because I think there's an understanding among our developmental disability community that people should be able to live in their homes in the community, but people should do more than just live. They should have every option that somebody without a disability has, an expectation of work and post-secondary education and all those things. And so we need to move the council and the developmental disability community's mindset forward, that we've made this progress in home and community-based services, but we need to have full and inclusive lives. And that really needs to be a focus on employment. We've done a good job at post-secondary. We have some options. We can expand that. But people need to be able to go to work where they want to work and have those opportunities like anyone else. So that I challenge the council to really kind of start focusing their attention in that area.
And grabbing other advocates instead of, okay, well, that, you know, how many people that work in it and live it and have family members, we all overlap some kind of way.
And just one last statement. I think that also when we don't have that expectation of employment and those opportunities, that works backwards into our education system, because then we have an education system that doesn't see these students with disabilities as having anything meaningful once they exit the K-12 system. So they don't see the investment as a priority because they see these kids are just not having anything when they become adults. And so I think we could shift the mindset going backwards if we can have this more opportunities for these students as they become adults in employment.
And it's possible. Other states do it. It's not impossible.
Definitely.
Well, thank y'all so much. I believe that if there's some more questions for Melissa, Melissa always does a pretty decent job being on the hot seat, so she does a really good job of that. So if there are no other questions and comments for Melissa, we're gonna move on to the next item of the agenda. The Louisiana Department of Education update from Meredith Jordan and Dr. Kate Brumley.
Wonderful. Well, I'll invite Dr. Brumley up to join me. I was so excited with his busy schedule that he was able to come and spend some time with the council and with our education and employment committee and really talk to us and let him get us kicked off today about some of the work that we are doing.
Thank you all for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I've enjoyed the conversations and can tell you, I've learned some things about some of the needs and opportunities ahead. So thanks for sharing that information with me. On the educational space, particularly K-12, we know that we still have a lot of work to do in providing the education that our students with exceptionalities need and deserve, and also better supporting families. I often say that our students with disabilities or our students with exceptionalities, they have some of the most passionate family members in the entire educational system. And I think, unfortunately, that's, I don't know that that's a good thing, because it means they've had to fight so long for everything that they receive. And it just shouldn't be that hard. And so we know that we have work to do. I will tell you some things that we have done that I think are really important and helpful. And in sharing these things, I'm not suggesting in any way that we've arrived. I'm just saying that these are some good positive movements. I think number one is at the department, we shifted the diverse learners division, which Meredith leads, and it's so accessible to everyone and helpful. We've shifted it under the teaching and learning department. Because we really believe that whenever we're having conversations about reading or math or science or what high school looks like, we need to have the voices, all those voices at that table, so that we're not isolating and leaving out a very important subgroup of our students. So that move happened. I think that's been a positive move. Another thing that's happened is Meredith has done a good job working with special education directors around the state to try to bring that collaboration back together and those networking meetings together, so that sharing of ideas and challenges can be facilitated. The next thing is, one of the things we noticed is that throughout the state of Louisiana, there is a lacking in terms of individuals who can, in school systems, lead special education departments. That skill set is in high demand, and unfortunately, we don't have adequate supply to meet that demand. And so we are continuing to run our special education leadership fellows program, and we just actually graduated a new set of fellows. And so they are being mentored by more experienced special ed directors from throughout the state. And so that's a program that runs throughout the course of the year, and we'll be doing that again. But I feel like if that would have happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago, we wouldn't be in such a dire need of special education leadership talent across the state. So that I think is important. Another thing that's important is the work of the advocates and individuals in this room around the special education camera law. You know, we were happy to support and speak for that and have conversations with legislators around that. But just want to be clear, like, special education advocates are the ones that really push that across the finish line. And so we are going to have our first set of reporting on that very soon. I know Meredith will share information about that. Sometimes there's some frustration from individuals that more systems haven't put all the cameras in the classroom, but the way in which that law was crafted says that the parent has to request the camera. And so that probably hasn't happened as quickly as people would have liked for it to happen, but it's in many ways a byproduct of the way in which it was crafted. I want to let the group know that in this year's executive budget, we put in and the administration thankfully granted and the legislature approved, we put in a 10% upkeep dollar amount. So $8 million was set aside for the cameras installation last year. But we know that every year there's upkeep to those cameras. And so we just determined a 10% rule. And so we have made an $800,000 request this year. And thankfully that's included in the budget. Another important piece, I think, is special education teacher pay. We requested from our legislature and were able to get $25 million in funding for what we call differentiated compensation, which really has 4 different areas. And what that means is that school systems, their governing boards, their superintendents are going to have an additional set of dollars that they can use for key areas. And one of the areas that we highlighted and we called out alongside high school science and high school math is K through 12 special education. And so what school systems are going to be able to do is they can take this pool of money that there is their pool of money, and they can say, you know what, in our system, we're going to prioritize special education teachers, and they can pay those teachers additional dollars. So they may want to decide they want to pay special education teachers $5,000 or $10,000 more than other teachers as a driver to move people into that particular body of work. We feel like that's really important just from a market perspective, because maybe it will incentivize some people who previously had not thought about a career in special education to go and do that work. So we're thankful for that. That goes into effect this particular year. And then the last thing I'll mention is, well, actually 2 things. I know it's late in the afternoon, but a couple of things. One, we just launched our special education playbook, which has gotten a lot of good national attention, and it centers around making sure students with disabilities have access to core content instruction with the highest level of teachers and giving them additional time to experience that learning. And that document isn't like we're done, it's over. It's a living document. And as we get feedback and hear from people of places to get better with that, we'll do that. But that's already like garnering a good bit of national attention. The last thing I'll say is I talked to a group of parents who were concerned about our dispute resolution process and how like IEP decisions and other conflicts between systems were resolved. And so I shared with them that we would commission an independent study to look at our dispute resolution process. So we did commission an independent study to come in, review that process, meet with parents, I know they met with even families, separate families. And so they pulled together a report and a set of suggestions for us on how to get better. So really excited to have that in our hands, and we're looking through that to see what revisions we'd like to make or should make to that process. So I say all that to say we're actively engaged in trying to do better. It is a continuous improvement process, and we have a long way to go. But we are we are committed to trying to continue to do better. And I'm glad to be here to share some of that information with you all today. Mayor?
Great. So I have just a couple of items to piggyback on a couple of things that Dr. Brumley mentioned. So you all actually have access to a link. It's on the full council agenda. I didn't catch that before yesterday, to the local special education advisory council reports, but I want to talk a little bit about it today. I won't really go into it tomorrow. But we have posted on our website, per that legislation, we began collecting local special education advisory councils, their annual report of activities for the 2022-2023 school year. We started communicating this requirement very early, probably, mid-year last year, December or January, that this was coming. This was the first year because, as you all know, every time we add another thing for our school systems, sometimes there's a little bit of a curve to say, hey, you're required to do this. Great. Thank you for pulling that up. So this is posted now on our website. And so you can literally go and click for every single school system and access their local annual report that tells you activities for what their local special education advisory council did in that year. We are still following up. You all know it's always my goal to have 100% of this information for you all, but you will see that we did not receive these from some school systems. So we're still following up, and we will update this as I get additional reports, and we'll update it and repost that link. So those are available to the public. And again, this is an annual requirement. So same time next year, we're gonna, I believe legislation says they have to submit them to us in May. And so we gave them the whole month of May to get these reports and get these links in to us. I feel like this is really accessible. Instead of giving you all hundreds of pages of reports, go to the school system that you're interested in, click on the link, and there's your report. And so again, this is something that will be an annual requirement that my office will administer and help support our school systems with this requirement each year. So I wanted you all to see this and have that in case you have any questions about it. The next thing, Dr. Brumley mentioned a little bit about sped cameras. I know that's of big interest to this group. You all had a great impact on that particular legislation. We brought a report to Bessie in April about how much of that funding had been spent. And remember, really last year was the first implementation. Also remember that legislative funding wasn't designated until the 2022 legislative session. So to start this school year was when we started the process of getting that funding out. And so really, I mean, mid-year around December, January, where school systems really had that funding in hand and said, okay, let's start making a plan and accepting requests from parents. So we did an April report to Bessie that based on a survey we sent, we tried to get some preliminary data about where these cameras were being installed, how much money had been spent. I'm happy to report, you'll see we're bringing an August Bessie report. So I don't have that report for you, but I can send it to this group once it's finalized as we bring it to Bessie. That our school systems have spent over $1 million of that $8 million allocation that they received from the legislature. Whereas in April, so those expenses have gone up, which is what we and I think stakeholders and the public want to see. That as parents request that the cameras are being purchased and are being installed. And so what you'll see on that August Bessie report is for every school system who received funding, you will see what was their total allocation. We actually had them report to us in our grants management system how many special education classrooms they have that met that requirement, because that's not information that we would have or track as far as how many special education classrooms that can change year to year based on your population. And you will also see there how many parent requests, we ask them to tell us how many parent requests have they received, how many of those have been granted, and how many cameras have been purchased, and how much of their funding have they already used. So it'll give you quite a bit of information, good information representing the 2022-2023 school year. And again, this is something that we have committed to updating Bessie on annually, or quite frankly, as they request it. And so this will be an annual data request that we are doing to keep track of how much is being spent, how much do school systems have left from that initial allocation meant for purchasing and installing those cameras. So stay tuned. I will send you all and share that report that will go to August Bessie, but I definitely wanted to give you all an idea quarterly of what that spending. We're at approximately $1 million now. And Dr. Brumley mentioned it. Of course, some of the big work that we have been doing in our office has been around adopting high quality research-based instructional practices to really improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And what we know based on research needs to happen with students around inclusive practices, educational instructional practices in our state. And I believe that as we support school systems in implementing these practices, looking at their schedules, looking at the structure of these students' day, do they have intervention time built into their school day equitably for students with disabilities to also participate in that direct intervention, that only then will we begin to see outcomes improve for our students with disabilities in our state. And with that, I think we'll open it up to entertain any questions about any of that information we've shared.
Anyone has any questions? Okay, Mary.
I wanted to make a comment about the cameras in the classroom. Our son is in a self-contained classroom. Our classroom met the requirements, and it was a very, very seamless process for Rapides Parish. We did get the camera in our classroom. And so to sit here as we talked about it for so long and then see it happen, I was very pleased. I did not know that was, the request was made last year. We had it put in place last year. So I don't know if once the camera is in there, do they have to do something every year?
No, so
What was that
basically-
after it gets started. That's
I feel like I know what your question was. No, I mean, it's up to you dollars. So they have the $8 million access, which is for the initial installation. But we didn't want a system to feel as if they didn't have the dollars for upkeep of that. If they needed to make a repair or they needed to make a replacement. And so we just decided on 10% of the initial. And so that will flow into the systems as well. And that's the money that they can use should there be an issue with that particular camera in your son's classroom.
Did you know, I know that they had to, I think, send the policies, but on a policy standpoint, will I have to ask for the camera to be put back in use, or will it's there now? I know everybody had to sign off, that the camera is going to be activated in our classroom, and everybody did. And so I just wonder, is there something that I need to do now to remind them, or to see if there's something that they need people to sign ahead of time, so that we're not delayed, or it takes some months to get everybody to sign off on that in the classroom. I didn't know what those details might look
That's
like.
a really good question, Mary. And I think that was, we started initially getting questions from school systems, like, what do I do, right? Like, if I have parent requests, I install those cameras. What do I do with the rest of the funding? Well, what if your son changes classrooms? So I would say, stay close to your school system. And if he's in the same classroom, you shouldn't have to do anything. But like, as I think about a student moving through a school system or potentially changing special education classrooms, then that may have to initiate an another conversation about that classroom, right?
I do think you'll see less movement though. You know, whereas schools were more fluid before moving classrooms, I think you'll see less of that.
I mean, there's nothing prohibiting a school system from putting cameras in every classroom.
No, that's right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Some-
And
So they
some
could have a
that.
policy. So it's really the school system's policy to really look and see what it says. Yeah.
Our policy, see, I didn't know if I needed to make another, but like, are y'all gonna flip the switch for the next school year?
It does depend on what.
But I would see if you have if you, like you said, the parents had to sign off that were in the classroom. If there's different kids in the classroom, they need to get, if that's part of their policy,
Yeah.
that they would have to do that again. But there's nothing that says they have to take the camera out and they're not
Yeah,
gonna do
no,
that.
I just wondered to have them flip the switch back on and say, yes, we're doing this again and have everybody re-sign or whatever they have to do. I
And
didn't
some
know.
systems were, and Meredith, you have more examples, some systems were more proactive and they just went ahead and just camera across
Yeah.
the board, you know?
And those special ed class that
Yeah.
they knew were fully self-contained, they just
Which
did
I
it.
think is great.
But you had some of them were, said we've got the money, we'll go ahead and do it. There were several.
Any other questions or comments at this time? I just wanted to say, moving, oh, go ahead.
I know that, we work hard for our cameras or whatever within the classroom. And we required for, you know, them to have it, but I'm guessing the verbiage is stating that it has, like a parent has to ask for it to be done. Now, for the parishes or for the districts that has adopted it and just did it because they had the funding, could that be a suggestion sent out to the other ones? Just a suggestion, because, you know, I feel like a parent shouldn't have to ask. If the funding is there, put it in there.
Well, and that law.
I mean,
Sorry.
also a privacy law too, like, I mean, you special ed or not, but you don't want your kid being videotaped without having without going through proper channels.
Yeah, but that was sort of kind of the point of us putting a camera in there for the safety of our kids that were self-contained and that couldn't speak for themselves, and things were happening in the classrooms. So that was the point of us putting those videos in there. Cause they had too many complaints and stuff of things happening and nothing was being able to be proved. It was he say, she say. So that was the point of the cameras. So even if they didn't have permission or not, I feel like if you know it's a self-contained thing and the law already required and the federal funding have already been established, it should just be put in there.
Well, this is state funding that our state is committing to these funds. And we're thankful for that. But for whatever reason, that's the way in which the law was crafted around the parental thing. So there may be, you may have some advocacy and you may have some conversations and that could be adjusted if that's the will of the community and the legislature. But right now, essentially, that's how that's built out. I mean, I like the approach that some of the systems have taken where they're just saying, we're doing it across the board. I mean, I think that's the simplest thing to do, but the law doesn't provide for them being mandated to do that in the way that it's presently written.
Okay.
Say so. During the school year, if we're gonna put our kids in a self-contained class, and they put up people up front before they even trying to advise them and say, is it all right for my child to be in that class with a camera in the class?
Well, I think that they are doing that in the instances, as mentioned earlier, like where she had requested, they're having to do some work with all the children in the class so that there's parent information so that everyone's aware.
So if they doing that, I mean, we do have kids that can't speak for themselves, and we definitely have a lot of stuff that goes on in classroom that's hidden. And we done had so many incidents that going on in the classes that kids that can't speak for themselves have been harmed. The cameras is a good idea to be in the classes, but also we have to look at safety in certain ways for them. But if they sign a thing stating that they know that they in the classrooms, I mean, that should deal it right down.
Yeah, I mean, the way the law is written, though, it essentially says that the parent has to request it. Now that law can be altered, it can be amended, but right now, that's the way it's crafted. But I mean, I think you all raised really good points here, but that's the way in which the law was crafted and it exists today.
And I haven't heard from school systems that this idea of letting the other parents and individuals know, hey, there's being a camera placed in here, that's hindered. I haven't heard that has happened. Doesn't mean it hasn't, but I haven't heard that has been a barrier, right? So like when I start saying there's going to be a camera in here and someone has said, no, we haven't, probably the other parents in that room are probably thankful too.
And maybe there's an opportunity through all our various outlets just to continue to remind parents that that's an option.
I have a comment, I guess it's a comment, and I made this comment, similar comment at a special ed advisory panel several months ago. But I think from what I hear from parents is the issue is around monitoring, and that in the past, 10, 15 years ago, there were monitoring teams that went into districts and looked at certain things. And it was a interdisciplinary team of people that went in, and they were able to give feedback, and school districts were able to take some proactive measures to do whatever was needed. And at that time, we're looking at the plans, and there was some really, I thought could be potentially really good resources for school districts. But I felt that if school districts aren't pushed in a way to say, this is where we need to improve, they may not be as willing to access those resources. But those teams could really give some good feedback to the districts. I think it did at the time when they were in place. And so now districts are monitoring themselves. It's kind of the process of doing self-monitoring and that type of thing. And I think that there's some concern that that's not always identifying the issues or helping them to, consider other ways that they could do things better and providing the services for those students.
Yeah, I mean, like was mentioned earlier, I think this is a function too of budgets that were cut, and there were the staff that were previously engaged in that, and it was like 15 years ago, was substantially more than exists today. And so we do have this self-based component to an overall risk-based monitoring system, but it does lead where, depending on where someone is on the spectrum, it can lead to individual on-site reviews, corrective action plans. There are other options that could be utilized, and I think need to be explored moving forward if correction doesn't happen, that historically haven't been used, but I think that we need to start looking at those and exploring those. So yeah, I mean, Bambi, I think you raise a really, really good point that we have to continue to think through about what might be best.
I think in that conversation, it was about using the IDEA funds more, and I don't know if there was any change made to that, but maybe moving forward, that those IDEA funds could be utilized to be able to have those monitoring teams in the future.
Yeah, we talked about that, about expanding some of those. Our sped monitoring team right now is a team of about 5 individuals. So like Dr. Brumley said, we have some self-assessments depending on where you fall in the risk-based monitoring leveling system, or there could be desk monitoring, or there could be some on-site monitoring. But we've also been talking about, like, how do we access more of the desk or on-site monitoring, what does that look like? What capacity is needed? Definitely.
I think in the past, like people from other districts would go, they would move, you know, and monitor one another and give that feedback. And I know that there's shortages of staff and that type of thing, but I think that's really be important thing to look at.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one more. I think one of the things that, that we have struggled with is the other services that are part of an IEP, communication being one. Our son is verbal when he wants to be with certain words and other times he's not, and we're struggling with communication. Speech therapy at school, having the therapies and the resources that they need. I think they just kind of depend on the practices that they use are not consistent throughout a school year. Even we've tried to do low tech, some, you know, computer stuff, and so we've struggled with that. And I think sometimes just kind of hearing about some of the other resources, the other wraparound services besides the teachers, you know, pay and their shortage, that the other services are out there. When you're getting 30 minutes of a speech therapist in 6 weeks or whatever it is, and for a child that's pretty nonverbal, it has not been, I don't think I know it's not meeting his needs. And now we're struggling as he's getting older, that leads to, he's not in daycare now. And then we tried a little summer camp, and then, you know, it's for typical kids, and that didn't work because a lot of it was communication. And so I felt like we were.
May I ask you a question? Feel free to not answer, that's no problem, but do you feel like the providers are available within your community and they're just not being utilized, or is there a lack of providers? Because I want to try and help solve for that.
Right. I think that, you know, there's a speech therapist that is for several schools. So that one person is trying to meet all the needs. And even in our classroom, you'll see that she'll, you know, maybe it was supposed to be Hayden was maybe supposed to have, you know, a dedicated time with her, and she's pulling, you know, trying to meet the needs and pulling in the other kids, so that she can maybe see them twice a week, because half of it's this student and half of it's that. So I know that they're trying. I just know that resources, especially speech for us, has been one of the things that we struggled with. And when they, you know, it's frustrating for the child and for the speech therapist and for the teacher. And it has snowballed even with a device. I don't know if you know, but people with, our child can be very hard-headed. And so, you know, when they meet that, I feel like that they're stretched so far that when they get a little bit of resistance on, he doesn't want to use the computer today, they're more likely to say, okay, than have the time that they would have needed to spend with them. So I know that besides the teachers, the other, you know, speech for us for sure is one that we struggle with. So I don't.
So Mary, I typically a chair would jump in and say, oh no, let's stay on the agenda, let's this and all of that, and try to do all this Robert's rules. Mary's story is so important because she's not the only mother that's experiencing this. There are thousands of parents, thousands of family members. And so Mary has been on this council, how many years, Mary? I have seen Hayden grow. We all have seen Hayden go. And there's siblings on this council. There's parents on this council. There's spouses. There's self-advocates on this council. And so it was important, Mary, for you to be able to share your story so that your baby is not seen as just a number or a name on a document. And so the passion and advocacy from the stakeholders, in my opinion, always comes from a space of their hearts. And so, yes, we're gonna come at you with the hard questions. Yes, we're gonna come at you and you're gonna feel like, oh my goodness, this cheap seat is so hot. Melissa's be sitting in burning seats, bless her heart. But it comes from their heart. And so I do want to say that moving diverse learning division to teachers learning department was one of the best decisions that I think you all have made. Because it allows for us to sit in the place where we need to be right alongside educators. Previously, we were in that opportunities, and I don't even want to talk about that. That was not where we needed to be. And so moving us there, I believe, puts us in a better position. I think the ask is accountability. And I think the concern is, and you can hear the different stories, the concerns when people say monitoring, you know, when people say compliance, which that's like the C word, nobody wants to say that word. But our parents are asking for that. I will say that I do see a work in progress. Mary, could you agree? Definitely. And it's hard for me to say that because I'm always hawk-faced and but I do see a work in progress and I do see a willingness. But it was the advocates and it was the stakeholders with the classroom, the cameras in the classroom. It was the moms that got on the news that said, this is what's out here. This is what's happening to my son. It was the advocates and the families going to the state capitol. It was them. They are the reason why these cameras are in the classrooms. The research-based instructional practices, Meredith, keep doing that because and whatever report you have on that, bring to the Education Employment Committee and give it to them ahead of time so they can dissect it and, you know, give you support and feedback on it. I just was trying to question on SEAC reports. I have not been on the website. I haven't clicked it. But does it reveal discipline data for students with disabilities who have been suspended? I'm concerned that there was a time when we used to receive reports of the number of students with disabilities who were suspended out of school, in school detentions. I'm sorry to say even restraints, that's a horrible word, but the DD Council used to get that data every single quarter from all of the districts. We need to know if our kids are being put out of school, if our kids are being isolated, if our kids, you know, we need that data. And we used to have it every quarter. And so I'm asking that the committee continue to put DOE in the hot seat and ask for that data every quarter. We need to know what's happening. And Meredith, by race and ethnicity, grade level, school district, I mean, it's a lot, but we used to get it every quarter. Charter school, that kind of information we're going to need to have because we need to know what's happening to our kids. We need to know what things are in place for them. So with that being said, are there any other questions for this committee? For this report from LDOE? All right, well, guess what? We are finished with that part of the agenda. Now we'll be moving forward. Yeah, right. So now we'll be moving on to the update on the Louisiana Commission for the Data from Bambi Polazola.
And I think that may have been intended to be the Louisiana Special School District, because I think that would apply more to this committee, but I could give, I'm on both of them, so I could give information. The Louisiana Special School District, I think I reported at the April meeting, they have a new superintendent. He started May 1st, Dr. David Martin. seems to be just a really great leader, dynamic, the community, the teachers, parents, alumni, all are really excited about his leadership. They are in the final stages of getting a new principal for the Louisiana School for the Deaf and the Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired. The national search, community involvement, they put together a team of to review those nominations, like the teacher selected a teacher among themselves, a parent was on it. So they really was an engagement that everybody was helping to make that selection. And so that's exciting. He really wanted to have leaders who are experts in deaf education, experts in visual impaired education. And also they have the juvenile justice system under the special school district. So all of that is really exciting. He comes from Tennessee School for the Visually Impaired, and there they had really robust regional leaders that helped, like for those in the school, students that were still in the school district that didn't come to the centralized state school, that they were helping those school districts to work with those students that that had visually impairment. And so I think that his idea is to have be that resource to our local school districts for those kids that are deaf or visually impaired that are still in the regional school district. So it's really exciting. I would encourage everyone to really try and support the special school district in their efforts. And I know that it takes some for parents to be able to feel comfortable that that's the best placement for their kids. And I know we, as a DD Council, we promote inclusion, and it's a little bit different whenever you're talking about deafness, because the least restrictive environment is an environment where they're with other students who are deaf and speaking ASL. Sometimes it's very restrictive to put them in a class where nobody else is speaking ASL and they're the only ones in it. So it is a little bit different mindset than what we're normally used to, but it's good if we can have a quality school that parents have that choice where they can either stay in their local school district if they choose, but they have that choice of somewhere to really get quality service in the state. And then in regards to the Commission for the Deaf, Melissa might have to help me. I think you're going to be added.
I am.
Yeah, Meredith is going to be added. So we'll have Department of Education, we have LRS. And so I feel like the commission has moved. That is one of our success stories, I would say, over the past 7 years. And really looking at some ways in which I think people who are deaf can access voc rehab more successfully. Looking at trying to blank on what I was trying to think about. They have Innovate is they're contracting. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of what it is that they're trying to do. I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank on it. And Melissa's not helping me.
They launched their register.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Huge.
Yeah, so interpreters, having qualified interpreters, so a registry of those, because not all interpreters are created equally. And one thing that I think is important for us to understand when we're dealing with the deaf community is that ASL is not English. It's another language. If you ever, I took one ASL class, and it really is a different language. Sometimes I think those of us who are hearing think they're just translating word for word, but it's not. It's different. And so to have that quality interpreters, like they created a registry, so show they have qualified interpreters. They're also looking at different models of the way the commission, this is what they're doing, looking at different models in the way the commission can be set up within the state that really amplifies the voice of the deaf community and gives them access to services. Because oftentimes I think that we look at things different from a hearing perspective, and sometimes are maybe not as receptive to the deaf perspective, and they really need to have that autonomy to be able to say what it is that they need as a community, just like the developmental disabilities community does. And so they're looking at some models in other states to get ideas of what's the best way to be able to have a really a good commission that really serves the deaf community. So I think that's about there's a lot of other good things going on. There was, someone who was, Brandy Bordelon, who is a deaf, hard of hearing, individual who was, recognized by FEMA, for her work in outreach to the deaf community in regards to disaster and emergency preparedness. So she was recognized like nationally for that work, which is a really great thing for our state since we get hit so hard with disasters and we have such a large population of deaf people. So I think that's it.
Hey, any questions for Bambi Polozola?
Let's look good.
When's the go to come next, Bambi?
And the link is on my report for tomorrow. Everybody register.
We'll hear about it at least one more time.
Okay, all right, any questions for Bambi, any comments for Bambi? I do wish to say a few things. This is my last education and employment sharing meeting. It has been, I want to tell y'all it's been fantastic, but then I'm gonna say it's fantastic because we live via YouTube, but I will say, I will say that it's been very interesting. I have learned from the best people here. Like, you know, the thing about the DD Council, you have to come prepared, you have to come bringing your A game, you have to know this policy. And there are so many, I'm surrounded by so many wise people, right? Mary and I have been here forever with Jill. Jill's been here forever too.
According to my the official term is in elder.
All right. When Jill was here, I think when I got here, so, and I know I've been here for a minute. But Bambi, listen, it has been a pleasure to work with you, to learn from you, to just witness your advocacy. And I just want to say to you, thank you for allowing me to serve next to you. I remember my second meeting, I was like, what is this? And you were like, welcome to the council.
I think that's everybody.
So I want to thank Bambi, Melissa, you know, Meredith, I'm just getting to do this. Listen, there's been several of you, I'm sorry, since I've been here.
A period where there wasn't a meeting.
There's a period that wasn't a you, so again, thank you. I've seen people go from certain positions and now they're like leads. I ain't gonna say anybody's name, wink, 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 wink. But it's good to see them too as well. So it's been a pleasure. Committee, keep your feet on the necks of the state agencies. Yes, I said it, quote it, put it in a box, put it wherever on my tombstone. Keep advocating, keep speaking up, know your policy. Know the data, hold the torch is being passed. There are many people before you that fought for this council, that fought for a platform for us to be here. It's up to you to lead us moving forward. And so I'll be watching from the sidelines, cheering, but it was a pleasure to serve. It was a pleasure to be here with you all. With that being said, any other comments? All right. The meeting is adjourned.
Yay.